Morning, guys. Real quick, I'm just going to do a quick overview of your study guide for the test that you're going to be having on Unit 3. Please have it, with you if you're going to watch this video and pay attention as I go through it. I'm going to give you the answers. I just want you to know that, you know, what I'm going to do is go through the entire Google slide with you as we do it. Okay. So first off. The first question is, what were the Articles of Confederation? Remember, the Articles of Confederation is the first attempt at government that we are going to try. Okay, so after the Declaration of Independence, it's going to be the first one that we ever try to complete, try to use, and it didn't work. Okay, it didn't help us. It didn't give us a good government, but it did have some positives. Now, two benefits of the Articles of Confederation we've already talked about was the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Now, Land Ordinance set forth how the government would measure and get land. The Northwest Ordinance talked about how it would become a state. So, Land Ordinance gives us land. Northwest Ordinance makes laws for how it will become a state. So, understand that. Okay, the four benefits of the land ordinance, or I'm sorry, of the Northwest ordinance, um, it's gonna govern itself. Okay, and what it does is it tells everybody you need to go west. Okay, go west, manifest destiny. That just means it's our God-given right to go. Okay, it freed the slaves in the new territory, which we will know that the southern states won't like that. And it made laws for admitting new states into the Union, such as Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The fourth thing is it mandated the establishment of public schools. Okay, so it told us to go west, freed the slaves, made laws, and then made schools. Okay, let's see. Number 4, list 3 negatives of the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so 3 of those would be there's no executive branch. It lacked the power to tax. It could not regulate commerce, so it couldn't regulate trade and stuff like that. Let's see. No ability to establish a national currency, and it gave power to the state governments, not the national governments. Now, a lot of people back then, they liked having the power in the state governments, but we're going to see that that's actually going to become problematic later on. Okay, the national government has to have power too, and that's where we're going to get into the whole separation of power thing. Okay. All right, let's see. Number 5. How did Daniel Shay's rebellion impact the Articles of Confederation? Okay, so what this was, okay, you had all these poor farmers who wanted to rebel against the government, a government that had promised to give them a government, had promised to pay them, but had not. Okay, and then they were still getting taxed. So the Articles of Confederation resulted in a weak national government. Okay, and it showed. Okay, Daniel Shay's rebellion is going to show that the Articles of Confederation is weak because they don't have enough power to send in anybody, okay, to confront these types of rebellions. Okay, it even says Americans began to support the establishment of a stronger national government. Okay, state governments weren't doing it. Okay, and then the federal government, their Articles of Confederation, they couldn't do anything about it either because they didn't have the power to send in a militia or send in an army. Okay, so that's why we need the Constitution. Okay, so number 6, the purpose of the Constitution. Okay, the Constitution was created so that we would have a new national government. It would be centralized. Okay, and it would allow us to have those powers that we didn't have, like having the executive branch, or like being able to send in the military, and like being able to tax and collect money like you should. Okay, guys, remember the Constitution. We still have it today. Okay, it works. Okay, there's a reason why it still is around today. Okay, so the purpose of the Constitution is to provide us with a new national government and to provide us with stronger national government over states. Okay, with that being said, though, they're still going to be balanced out. Okay, we try to make it to where one's not stronger than the other. Okay, number 7, how did the Great Compromise solve the issue of state representation in the new federal government? Okay, remember the Great Compromise. Okay, New Jersey was afraid that bigger states would have more representation than them. Okay, larger states felt like it should be based on population; they should have more of the vote. Well, they argued about it, and then they come up with the Great Compromise. Remember, going to the movies with the girlfriend, all that stuff. Okay, bicameral legislature means that you have a two-house government. You have a Senate and you have a House of Representation. Okay, the House of Representatives is going to be based off more like the Virginia type plan. Okay, meaning that your representation is going to be based off your population. But the Senate, everybody will have the same amount of votes, and they still do, and that is 2 votes per state. Okay, there's 2 senators per state. Number 8, how did the Three-Fifths Compromise solve the issue of state representation and new federal government? Okay, now with the Three-Fifths Compromise, okay, Virginia all of a sudden out of nowhere wanted to count their slaves as part of their vote. Now, does that work? No, it shouldn't, because apparently, they never counted them as people now. And so now that they want to count them as people, the smaller states say, well, that's not fair. You can't count them as a full vote because you don't even count them as human beings most of the time. And so, of course, they get mad, but the government wants to keep the peace. And so what they did is they said, we are going to allow the states to count 3/5 of their slaves while calculating their entire population. Okay, so states like Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, okay, they can't count a slave as an entire person. They can just count them as 3/5. Now, when you do this, though, it still allows those states to have a larger population. So the southern states will have a bigger voice whenever it comes to the House of Representatives. Number 9, list 2 limits to the power of federal government in the Constitution. Okay. Now, what you have to understand here, okay, is that the national government can't do everything. Okay. Now, what they can't do is they can't establish local government systems. Okay. And they also, okay, they can't administer elections. Now, what you have to understand, you've got 2 things here. You have the powers divided between the national government. Okay, understand that federalism means that power is divided between the state and the national governments. Okay. Number 10, checks and balances. Okay. By the way, right here is where you're talking about your limits on the government. Not every branch. Okay, you have the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. None of which have the same laws or have the same rules. They all have to have different rules, and we talked about that because if one has more rules than the other, then obviously it'll be a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, and they can't do that. They have to have separate rules in order to be able to function correctly and not step on the toes of any of the other branches. Okay, so checks and balances. Okay, so number 10, separation of powers just means that you know your government is split. You have the national and the state government. Okay, but they have their own rights. Okay, checks and balances. Checks and balances is going to mean that that your national government is going to be limited by balancing the power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Remember, like I said, they don't have the same powers. They all have different powers. That way, it keeps them from stepping on each other, but it also allows them to check in on each other and make sure that the other one is doing right. Okay, what were the political beliefs of the Anti-Federalists? Okay, Anti-Federalists and Thomas Jefferson, okay, they believed that the government created by the Constitution would be too powerful and would eliminate the power of the states. Okay, see, so they believed that, like used to, okay, like with Great Britain, they believed that this national government would be too strong, it would be too powerful, and it would take over the states. And they believed that the states would have that taken from them. Okay, so a lot of these people, they feared this national government. They didn't really understand how good it would be for the future, but at first they were terrified. Okay, but you kind of have to be, right? Because the Articles of Confederation didn't work like they were supposed to. Who knows if the Constitution will? Okay, we have to figure out if it will or not. List two famous anti-federalists. Okay, really you only need one. The main one you need to know is Thomas Jefferson. What were the political beliefs of the Federalists? Now, the Federalists wanted the Constitution and a strong national government. These guys were the ones who said we have to have a strong national government. It has to be centralized, but we also want to have it split. Okay, just like Charles Montesquieu said, the government has to be divided within itself. Okay, to also protect the whole idea between separation of powers between the states and the federal government. Okay, and they believed that. Okay, so the two most famous ones you need to know there is definitely going to be Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Okay, so understand that those are the two that we are talking about. Okay, but the problem is, okay, the Constitution had to be ratified. Okay, the Constitution had to be ratified. And what that means is to be ratified, that means to be signed off, that means to be approved. Okay, but it wouldn't get ratified until something happened. And that something that had to happen was what we call the Bill of Rights. Jefferson said that the Constitution didn't protect state rights, nor did it protect individuals' rights. And so, because of that, okay, the Federalists said, look, you have to ratify the dadgum Constitution because we have to have it. We have to be able to use it in this new government. And Jefferson said, no, I'm not going to do it because it's not fair to it's not fair to the people. Okay, the people are being treated unfairly. Okay, so because of that, okay, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison are all going to sit down and they're going to do something and they're going to write something called the Federalist Papers with Alexander Hamilton writing most of them. Okay, John Jay wrote 29, Alexander Hamilton wrote 51, James Madison wrote the rest, but James Madison also writes the Bill of Rights. Okay, now they had to add the Bill of Rights to the Constitution as a way for them to ratify the Constitution. Okay, so number 18, where it said, what did the Anti-Federalists want added to the Constitution in exchange for ratifying the Constitution? Okay, so in exchange for voting on it and signing it, they had to promise, the Federalists had to promise that they would add the Bill of Rights, and so they do. Okay, number 19, what was the purpose of the Bill of Rights? Okay, the Bill of Rights, okay, its purpose is to give and guarantee states' rights and individuals' rights. Okay, it's our first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These are the ones that most of the time we always argue about. Okay, remember the First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion and speech, the press, and the right to petition the government. Okay, it gives you the right to petition anyways. Okay, I've done that before. I told y'all my story about my college professor, Mr. Usera, okay, who drove me nuts. Okay, and we signed and got a petition done and got him taken out. Okay, so understand you're allowed to do that. Okay, you're allowed to petition. Okay, but the Ninth Amendment and the 10th Amendment are probably two of the biggest ones in there because the Ninth Amendment says anything that's not mentioned in the Constitution, any rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, also belong to the people. Okay, and that is protected by the Ninth Amendment. It is our right. Okay, we have rights. Okay, even though they might not be listed, we do have human rights that can't be taken from us. Number 10, the states also have rights that can't be taken from them. So if nothing's listed in the Constitution about it, there it is. Okay, the 10th Amendment automatically protects that. Guys, please take your time on this. Use the PowerPoint throughout the test if you need to. And please pay attention to the wording of the questions, and good luck.